They're new this morning. CNN has learned that Russia has reached out to China both for military and economic support. That's according to two U.S. officials. So consider where that is coming from. For sure, they want this out there. China, for its part, is denying this report. They don't know anything about it. That's what one of the embassy officials said. CNN's David Culver joining us live from Shanghai, China. David, China generally likes to play the long game, but now what kind of position are they in?
You know, Brianna, hearing Kim there speaking about this discomfort, that's exactly what they're feeling right now. It's this lack of security as to where they should make their next move. And you seem to see that playing out from the officials, but it's also one that now is going to perhaps come to an end. I mean, we're getting to a point now where they're going to have to take a stance, perhaps, that's going to show where they fall in all of this. As of now, they've been saying we're neutral. We want to be peacemakers, even mediators between Russia and Ukraine. And they've portrayed one enemy in particular, and that's the U.S. and the rest of the West. However, what's going to play out in the next few hours is going to be a meeting between the top foreign policy official for China, that's Yang Jiechi, and he's going to be meeting with Jake Sullivan. That's going to be integral in all of this. That's going to be happening in Rome. And while they say it's been in the works for a while, what could come out of this could show what the next step is going to be from Beijing. However, let's look at how China is responding in particular to this reporting that Russia has asked them for military and economic aid. They're pushing back against it. They're saying that this is the U.S. peddling lies. That from the foreign ministry a short time ago. I'll read this. This was from the Chinese embassy in the U.S. They said, quote, "The high priority now is to prevent the tense situation from escalating or even getting out of control." They go on to say China calls for exercising utmost restraint and preventing a massive humanitarian crisis. They're doing a lot of talking in all of this. But what could play out in the next few days, weeks even, are actions from Beijing that show, are they going to step forward with a pragmatism that suggests, Brianna, that they're looking at the economic interests of their own population, or is this an opportunity for Xi Jinping to show ideologically where he stands, and is that right next to his best friend, his words, Vladimir Putin, or is he going to say, wait a minute, we need to take a step back, we need to perhaps elevate the opportunity for China to come out of this economically in good shape, versus taking any more hits in all of it?
Yeah.
Brianna.
Are they best friends or are they fair weather friends? I think we're going to see that. David, thank you so much for the report. CNN's Kylie Atwood is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Do we know yet, Kylie, how the Chinese are responding to this request?
Well, the Chinese embassy spokesperson here in Washington said they had never heard of that when asked about our reporting that Russia has asked China for this military and economic support for the invasion into Ukraine. The spokesperson went on to say that it is their priority that the situation in Ukraine doesn't escalate out of control, and also said that China calls for exercising utmost restraint and preventing a massive humanitarian crisis. But significantly, Brianna, this would be huge if China were to support Russia in this endeavor, because there are those places in Ukraine that have not yet been toppled by Russia. And of course, Chinese support could potentially give Russia the support that they need to do that. Now, we don't know exactly how China has responded to these requests from China for economic and military support. But listen to what the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said over the weekend about how the United States has been very clear with China that there would be consequences if they did provide support.
We are communicating directly, privately to Beijing that there will absolutely be consequences for large-scale sanctions, evasion efforts, or support to Russia to backfill them. We will not allow that to go forward and allow there to be a lifeline to Russia from these economic sanctions from any country anywhere in the world.
Now, Brianna, it is our reporting that China did know that Russia was going to go forth with this invasion before they did it. So that is significant. But this request for military and economic support came from Russia after they had already begun their invasion into Ukraine. Now, today, what we're watching is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Rome, and the White House said that that meeting had been in the works for some time. There aren't any deliverables that are expected, but it is a hugely significant meeting because the White House is concerned about China potentially providing any support to Russia. Brianna?
Yeah. Maybe no deliverables, but certainly a message will be sent, and we'll see what that is. Kylie, thank you so much.
Want to bring in David Sanger, White House and national security correspondent for the New York Times and a CNN political and national security analyst. David, we're going to talk about the situation on the ground in Ukraine in just a moment. But first, you've got some insight into this news that Russia might be asking China for help.
Well, there are all kinds of fascinating things about it. First of all, if Putin thought that he was going to be able to pull this off quickly, he wasn't intending on going and begging for additional help first. The second is that the U.S. leaked this out. Why did they do that? First, it's embarrassing to Putin. Second, it puts the Chinese right in the public glare of having to make a choice. Remember, it was just 3 weeks ago at the Munich Security Conference, the Chinese foreign minister said, we believe in the sovereignty of nations, the sanctity of their borders, and that includes Ukraine. So now if they come and they help him, they have just reversed on what they said publicly in front of the entire world.
Puts them in a bind. All right, David, overnight you put out a story in the New York Times that it's really interesting, talking about different ways this might end. And none of them are good, by the way, for Ukraine, or great for Ukraine. One of them is the whole war gets much closer to NATO, which we're already seeing. We're seeing this Russian missile attack on this base right next to the Polish border. We can push in and see just how close it is right there. Talk to us about that.
Well, the concern here all along for President Biden has been that he's going to stay out of this war, doesn't want to get in direct conflict. But he said if there is move 1 inch into NATO territory, then it invokes Article 5, which is the part of the NATO treaty that says an attack on one is an attack on all. So now we've got a couple of problems. One is an accident. I mean, you have this many missiles flying around this close to the border. The chances that something's going to land in a NATO country, pretty high. Remember, in 2014, the Russians shot down MH17, the Malaysian airliner. Again, that's the kind of thing that can happen when these are going on. But the second is that there's a lot of concern that Putin may decide to go push beyond this and, go down. If you go back to your original map, look how close he is here to Moldova, right there. He's trying to take Odessa, a key port. He would just be miles away.
You talk about possible negotiated solutions here and the difficult decision that President Zelensky might have to face. What do you mean?
Well, he's going to have a couple of really hard choices. Let's say that these negotiations work out. What are the Russian conditions if they stick to them? The first one is that President Zelensky acknowledges that Crimea is part of Russia. The second is that he acknowledges that this whole region of newly created states that Russia just recognized are in fact no longer part of Ukraine. So he would have to give up a big part of his country.
He's basically looking to annex or give Russia all this, more or less, right?
That's right. So basically that third of the country would go out, or quarter of the country. And the clock is ticking, because the closer that Putin moves in to Kyiv, the harder it gets to negotiate, because you can't imagine that if the capital falls, that Putin will then just settle for this, which we think was his original objective back in the fall, before he sort of expanded this to try to take the whole country.
How close is he at this point to having Russian troops operating all this region at this point?
He's doing pretty well in the areas by the coast. The further in, I think, the harder it gets. But this is not an area where he's going to run into the kind of opposition that he will in the West and up in Kyiv, more Russian-speaking, more divided opinion.
To the extent that there's a clock right now, you do think it is in what's happening in Kyiv, so we're watching that very closely. David Sanger, terrific article. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.